Hello there, it's me again. So, I told you I would upload a video today, trying for every Tuesday, doing so good. So, as you can see, we are in full tilt Halloween time here in the Cannon household. Got the shirt, I'm wearing, I don't know if I can get leggings, the earrings. I am ready to go because something was needed, a change was needed. So, with fall coming on and the Halloween season, we have started our yearly spooky watch. Usually, the month of October is spent every evening, after work has been done, after the kids have gone down, we watch scary movies. Since, excuse me, we're getting an early start this year, we decided to rewatch Twin Peaks. This, oh God, I got the burps, I'm so sorry. This is like the fourth time I've watched the whole series through, and there is such dense storytelling, so many characters, so many continual additions of plot lines, of characters, that there's so much. Like, my husband and I sit on the couch and we're just, do you remember this person? Who's that? Well, what happens to them? Where does this storyline go? It's just, we don't remember half of it. To be fair, that is happening to us more and more as time goes on, but really, it's kind of incredible the shit they got away with storytelling wise in that show. Have you ever watched Twin Peaks? Are you a fan? I know some people who just, they never got it. They aren't fans because let's be honest, David Lynch has his own thing, and you either like it or you don't. And I am decidedly, yeah, I like it. I'm not obsessed. I'm not a huge fan, but I like it. And I like Twin Peaks. I like the first run. The new one they just came out with a few years ago, I found disappointing. And I'll tell you why. The first run, there's so many different characters, something that I really like about the first run is everybody's nice, at least outwardly. We've got a lot of really nefarious characters, but everybody like remembers their manners. There's a scene where David Lynch as Gordon Cole, he's high up in the FBI. He comes to this little shithole town, Twin Peaks, and he's talking to the sheriff, and there's no pissing contest between them. Have you ever noticed that's kind of like a thing where different authorities want jurisdiction, so there's a continual pissing contest between them to see who can be the alpha big dog? There's none of that there. Gordon freely shares information, freely, gabs, and they're nice to each other. They're happy to share coffee and donuts. And the donut bar, come on, that's so great. If I worked at a place that had this gigantic donut and coffee spread every day, I would never leave that job. Never. I did work a job once where, I worked retail a lot, and we were having a Black Friday sale, and they bought us the worst pizza in town. They didn't buy from a chain, they bought from a local place, and this place was like notorious for, like, you would find hair in the pizza all the time. This isn't just like sometimes, it was all the time. It was hairy pizza, literal hairy pizza, and it was so gross. And it had sat in the employees lounge for like 6 hours by the time I got in there, and the smell from the old cheese and the congealed grease, usually not a bad thing. Good pizza gets greasy, it just does. But this, oh, no, we should have had the donut and coffee bar. That would have been much better instead of hairy pizza. But I really like that everybody's nice, that there's no, fight over jurisdiction. There is a little bit, it's a small part. I don't want to give spoilers in case you haven't seen it. Also, in the first run, there's a vast array of characters that includes women. That first run is really fair to women. We don't have the perfect woman. Everybody's messed up in Twin Peaks, but in different ways, in interesting ways. In the second run, I feel like women got a little degraded in the storytelling. They're still funny. Like there's still really funny storytelling, but there's a lot of women just there to be kind of fuckbags, if you know what I'm saying. There's a lot of um like they weren't constrained. Who ran it the first time? CBS or ABC? I can never remember. But they weren't constrained by network television censors anymore, so they could really go for it, and they do, and it's cheap. I found a lot about the second run cheap, and I would not be sad if they never did anymore. Everything that was wonderful and endearing about the first run was either wholly absent from the second one, or you only got glimpses of it. Because the first run is about, alongside all of the really messed up stuff, all of the really, the metaphysical and psychic stuff, it's about this small town, this really weird small town where really weird stuff is living among the people. They keep having these strange experiences because there's something out there, and that's amazing. And it wasn't in the second run. But back to what I was talking about. So yeah, the storytelling is so crazy because we're in season 2 now, and I completely forgot. We're getting a lot of branching offs of stories. You've got the main story, and then you've got side stories, but then the side stories start getting side stories, and then they start getting side stories, and we're getting a lot of extra characters, a lot of extra, whatever going on. And I can't help but think, this works in a visual medium. This would not work in written form. You would confuse the hell out of your readers. I mean, you're confusing the hell out of your watchers too, but because so many of the characters are already established, and they're charming and they're likable and you're invested, you can kind of get away with it. And I think that's kind of brilliant. Again, I'm amazed with what they got away with. Yeah, I said the return was bad. Like, I was going to make this a story time, tell my own little messed up story, my own twisty story. I mean, how many? We're 7 minutes in on this. Maybe we should. So I didn't make notes on it. I thought I could riff a little more on Twin Peaks, but I don't want to give spoilers, and I don't want to talk too much about, things maybe you haven't gotten into it. Maybe you don't like it. And, I know lots of people who they don't like it. I was very young when the first run was happening, but I was aware of it. I didn't watch it in the first run. I was a teenager. I watched the movie Fire Walk with Me first and was so confused. And to be honest, you have to watch the show to understand what the hell's going on in that movie. And the movie is very ephemeral and weird. And I mean, if you like the shows, watch the movie, because you get a little extra of, what's going on with Laura, and it's good. It's weird, but it's good. But I mean, that's David Lynch. So, okay, let's do a story time. I'm so happy I have my notes here. So I want to talk about my grandmother's grave. I, in case you don't know, am originally from West Virginia. I haven't lived there. I left 14 years ago, and I am never going back. There were a million reasons to leave and only like 5 reasons to stay. So I have no regrets about leaving, but I have never felt like I was home since I left. So I live in Pennsylvania now. I live in Eastern Pennsylvania. To get back to my hometown, it's about a 4.5-hour drive. And I can't be bothered to make that drive, especially since my grandfather died. He was the last person on my father's side of the family that could be bothered to pretend like he gave a damn about me. And once he died, my last real reason to go in kind of went with him. But I still relate as a West Virginian. I used to live in Washington State. We, were West Coasters there for a few years. And then we moved back here to be just among the slightly more familiar. The West Coast mentality, the Pacific Northwest mentality, was alien to me. It was off-putting. So we came back here and it's much more relatable. I feel like I know these people a little more. So, but I mean, I've lived here for almost 11 years. Lived in this very house for almost 11 years. I'm raising 2 boys here. I have lots of friends here, but I would not tell you I'm a Pennsylvanian. I live in Pennsylvania, but I am a West Virginian. My grandma, the few times I have gone back in to West Virginia to see anybody, I always take time to go see my grandma's grave. My grandma is my maternal grandmother. She died when I was 13 years old. She and I were very, very close. And for a lot of parts of my childhood, she was the only adult who consistently was nice to me. So we had a really good relationship. And so her dying when I was only 13 was really, really hard. But I want to talk about where she's buried. Now, the part of West Virginia where I'm from, let's see if we can get, that's the wrong side. So this is the shape of West Virginia. When you're a West Virginian, you learn this when you're about in first grade. This is the shape. So we've got the Eastern Panhandle and the Northern Panhandle. Where I'm from is right about here. So we call it North Central. The state comes about down to my wrist, and that's the shape of West Virginia. I'm from about right here. It's called North Central. I'm from a small town called Clarksburg, and we're a short drive away from Pittsburgh. You'll get a lot of Pittsburgh mannerisms from where I'm from, but you also get a lot of southernness. Something about West Virginia is, technically is a southern state. Here, where, the Civil War actually took place, we have a demarcation called the Mason-Dixon line, and it separates Pennsylvania and Maryland. And above it, that was considered northern states, Union states mostly, and below it, that's Dixie. The Mason-Dixon, that's Dixie. Southern states, mostly Confederate states. West Virginia was a Union state. We were never part of the Confederacy. We were a poor state and couldn't be bothered to mess with the greedy people because none of it was trickling down to us. So Southern in mannerisms, Southern in certain sensibilities concerning hospitality and manners, but also, we didn't really fight for the ability to keep slaves. Most modern people wouldn't know that, though. I mean, you see Confederate flags fly everywhere. You see Confederate flags here in Eastern Pennsylvania, too, which is like, learn your history, folks. What the... So, my grandma is buried in a cemetery close to the home where she grew up, and it's called Center Point, West Virginia. And it is, I was saying before, we got a lot of Pittsburgh where I grew up. We've also got a lot of brush and hollows and wilderness, just complete. There are roads to get to some of my friends' houses. You drove on dirt roads, 1 lane, dirt roads, no street lights, hardly any power poles or anything out there. I'm talking wild. And my grandma is buried in a place where they've built it up a little bit because they built a prison out that way. So there's more people milling through the area. But when I was little and when my grandma was buried there, it was what you'd call a one-horse town. There is a general store there that still had a hitching post in front of it where you would hitch your horses. And I mean, I'm not young, but I'm not damn old either. I mean, I was born in 1983. So up until like the mid 90s, this was still going on. You would go to that general store and you could buy a small bag of candy. You would get one of those little paper sacks and you would fill it with candy from the bulk bins for 25 cents. If you wanted a cold drink, they had an old metal cooler that you would take it out of. It wasn't like an actual refrigerated kind of thing. It was an old metal cooler that I think had some sort of compartment under it for ice, because it didn't have, it was an RC Cola cooler. And it was so old and weird. And right across the street from that place was a big hill, great big hill. It is the mountain state. We got lots of hills there. The Appalachian Mountains are old and rounded and full of trees, and the change of seasons is very dramatic there. And it's beautiful. You don't see it anywhere else. Even here, I'm not that far, and I don't get the same effect here, and I miss it. I miss living in the hills. But on top of this great big hill is my great-grandparents' old house. My great-grandparents were still alive when I was little. I think I was maybe 9 when my great-grandfather died. And actually, I was in my 30s when my great-grandmother died. She outlived her oldest daughter by many years. But their house, they had money. They held stock in Pittsburgh Steel, and they had stock in railroads. So they had money. And they were one of the first houses in that county to get indoor plumbing. Having said that, they still didn't get indoor plumbing until the late 50s. So they still had an outhouse. There was still an outhouse on their property, which I remember going there and seeing it. And my great-grandmother was not a nice person. She was a very bitter, mean old lady, but she could cook. Oh my God, she could cook. So going to this little house, it was they had money, and the house had nice things in it. Nothing ostentatious, nothing fussy, but the furniture was really sturdy and really nice. They had really nice appliances for their time. I mean, shit, they probably bought this stuff in the 60s, maybe 70s, but it was in perfect condition. She took really good care of it. And they had a cellar that was dug in to the hillside in their backyard, and it was just a big wooden door kind of slapped onto this hole, and you went in there, and they had brick shelves put in there so that the wood wouldn't rot away. And she kept a big jug of bleach in this cellar. And I was out there with her one day, and I remember there was a snake in the cellar on the shelves, and she reached out and she grabbed this snake and she shoved it in this jug of bleach, and she said, "It'll be dead by tomorrow." And that still amazes me, the things that I saw. But less than a mile down the road, on a different hill, but a similarly big hill, is a cemetery where they're now all buried. My great-grandfather's there, my great-granny's there, and my grandma is there. And it's because of the hilly nature of the area, you don't find a lot of cemeteries on the low parts or on the very few flat parts. Cemeteries are on hills, and they creep up. The older parts are always at the bottom, and the newer parts are more towards the top. And this cemetery, my family has been burying people there for years, since before the Civil War. There are very, very old headstones there. So there's an old section that is sectioned off. You have to get permission to go there. There's a little white clapboard country church right there, and then there's the Reverend's house right there. It's all on the grounds of the cemetery, and but you have to get special permission to go to the old part of the cemetery, like if you wanted to do charcoal rubbings or anything, because it is very old and there's a lot of crumbling headstones there. And then the newer part where my grandma's buried, it's very much more modern looking. A lot of the people that are buried there come from very humble families, so it's very simple. um, granite headstones, very, very simple. But I make sure to go there every time I'm in town. And it is actually out of the way. You got to really drive out to get to Center Point. And the last time I went there, it had been raining, and it was summertime, but it was like a cool day, and it was wet and it was gray, and I was there with my husband because I didn't want to make that drive alone, and there were all kinds of there's trees all around the perimeter of the place where they cleared it but kept some trees, and a lot of these trees are dead, which happens that you have a lot of trees, they die, and so there were all these dead trees and all of these granite headstones, and there's one obelisk in the whole place. Somebody got fancy and bought an obelisk to mark the grave of one of their relatives. And I wasn't paying attention. I was focused on going to see my grandma and making sure her headstone was clean and everything. And, I said my respects to her, and I stood up and I looked around, and there were vultures, big turkey vultures in that area, and they were everywhere. They were perched on that obelisk. They were perched all over the trees around. So much so that it was actually kind of like it gave you pause. It's not rare to see, a big turkey vulture. It's not rare to see two. There must have been 30 in these trees just watching us. And it was not the most, unnerving experience I've ever had, but it definitely was. Like, I took a whole bunch of pictures, and it was just like, geez, just all these vultures watching us. We were the only people in the cemetery that day, and it was pretty. So that's my grandma's grave, and it's I don't want to be buried somewhere when I die. The thought, and especially, from where I'm from, how we bury people. My grandma's grave is very peaceful because it's just a state road that runs through there. They maintain it enough, they keep it painted, but now that the coal veins have been dug out, it used to be, coal trucks barreling down through there. Now maybe it'll be a lumber truck every now and then. Somebody, got paid to have their land lumbered. But it's mostly a quiet road. So, my grandmother and my great grandparents, and who knows how many cousins buried out there. They're just on a hill overlooking an old state road. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, who died 7 years ago, I think, he is buried on a hill in a different part. It's a different part of the family. He's buried in a cemetery that overlooks just a garbage area. There's a lot of poverty in West Virginia, and it's not a nice place where I'm from. It isn't. It's poor. It's a very, very poor area. And his grave is on a hill that overlooks a lot of intersections, and it overlooks the railroad, and it overlooks an old school, and it overlooks car lots, and it just not nice car lots. Like, when you think, I'm not talking a car dealership, I'm talking a small car lot that only has at most 10 cars in the lot. It's not nice, and I don't want that for myself, and I kind of wish they didn't want that either. It's where he's buried is a nicer cemetery. It's nicer than where my grandma is buried, because it's from a bigger town. But I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for anybody close to me. If I have a say, we're not doing that. Cremate me, set my ashes to the wind, and then you don't have to visit a certain place, a certain depressing, somber place on Memorial Day or anything. It's depressing. It's okay. Have you ever been to one of those really, really, like, kind of I don't know how to say this, one of those bouncing cemeteries where there's always people there. People they're just kind of always there. they're always laying flowers or decorations or wreaths on the graves of their loved ones. And I mean, I get it. I'm not shitting on the giving of what they're doing, but so cemetery flowers, cemetery wreaths, those kind of things, they're usually made of like weather resistant plastic or vinyl or nylon. There's a very specific smell to that, and I hate that smell. And it always reminds me of headstones. My grandma, again, if you've listened to any interview I've ever done, I talk about her all the time. She was one of the most influential people on me because, you know, she spent time with me. So she was very, very important to me. But she was a hoarder. And she hoarded things like videotapes and books and craft supplies. And in the craft supplies territory was funeral flowers. Not funeral flowers, but cemetery flowers. Funeral flowers tend to be real. People would leave them, and then when the crew would come in to mow and run the trimmer along the cemetery, they would have to gather up these, you know, decorations. That's why you always have to go put new ones on there. It's expected that they're not staying there forever. And they would usually throw them away. But my grandmother had a deal where they would call her on the days where they would mow and, you know, do landscaping work. And she would go and she would just come back with a car full of these old sun-bleached stinking flowers. And I hate that smell. But her whole funeral was kind of traumatizing to me. And, you know, I remember they fixed her hair in a way she never would have done it. It was much fancier. They put a bunch of makeup on her, and she really wasn't a makeup person. And they had put you know, her hands were folded on her like this. And my great grandmother, you know, she was burying her daughter. She was outliving her daughter, and it was hard on her. And she kept grabbing my grandma's hand and rubbing it. And after a few hours of that, the makeup had rubbed away. And in contrast to that kind of blindingly peachy, healthy, alive, flesh-toned makeup that they had slathered on her, you could see this greenish gray skin peeking through. And I was 13. But I remember being so mad. Why were they trying to make her look alive? Why all of this posturing? And it made other people comfortable, I guess, to see her that way, but it freaked my shit out to see her that way, to see her costumed as alive. I would have honestly rather have seen her looking like a corpse. And I mean, I've been to funerals since, but not to someone who meant the world to me like she did. And yeah, don't do that to me. Throw me in an oven, grind me to dust, and then mix some glitter in, you know, so it's all sparkly, and then set me to the wind. And that's what I want. Don't, oh my God, don't do the viewing thing. And so that was story time. Tell me below, have you watched Twin Peaks? Are you a fan? Are you not a fan? What did you think of the second run, The Return? Is that what they called it? Did they call it Return? I don't remember. I'll watch it again through this time just to have, you know, my husband's a completionist. He's a video gamer, and video gamers tend to be completionists. I am not, and I don't care, but I will watch it with him. Just because, you know, I've been with him for 20 years. I guess I owe it to him to sit and watch everything he wants to watch. But he watches werewolf movies with me, so I guess we're even. So, tell me below, what do you think of Twin Peaks? Tell me also below, you know, are there any death traditions that kind of bother you, that kind of get under your skin? Do you think I'm silly for thinking the whole makeup and fancy dress thing that we do with dead people is freaky? Let me know. I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I've been told I'm weird my whole life. Go for it. And I hope all is well. And I hope the world is treating you well, because it isn't for everybody. Thank you for always being here. So, okay, we got the remote. Let's see. Do I get to cut it out this time because it works, or do I have to make a face? Damn it!